5 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was in my mid-20s, deeply in love with Daniel, a man who felt like my soulmate. We met in college and quickly became inseparable. We studied together, shared meals, spent weekends curled up with movies, and whispered plans about the future as if nothing could break us. He made me feel safe, loved, and wanted, and for a while, I truly believed that was enough to last forever. We spoke openly about marriage, joked about what our kids might look like, and even browsed apartments together. I imagined a life where we would build a home, start traditions, and grow old as each other's constants. The cracks began slowly, in ways that didn't seem alarming at first. Daniel had late nights at work, or so he said, and he started putting his phone face down on the table. When I reached for it once to check the time, he snatched it back, laughing nervously as if I had caught him doing something wrong. My gut tightened, but I ignored it, convincing myself it was stress or exhaustion. Then he became distracted, distant, almost like he was carrying a secret that weighed on him. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he reassured me, but his smile no longer reached his eyes. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that every couple goes through rough patches. I cooked his favorite meals, planned little surprises, and told myself he would snap out of it. But one evening changed everything. I had left work early and decided to surprise him at his apartment. His car was there, lights on, laughter drifting through the window. When I pushed the door open, my heart dropped. There, on the couch we used to curl up on, was Daniel, and beside him, no, wrapped around him, was Sophia, my best friend since high school. The girl I trusted with every secret, the one I called sister, the one who promised she always had my back. Their bodies untangled in shock as they noticed me, but the damage was already done. I felt like my chest had been split open. My legs shook so badly, I had to grip the wall to keep from collapsing. Sophia stammered excuses. Daniel begged me to listen, but their words blurred into a cruel haze. I remember dropping the groceries I had brought, his favorite wine, fresh pasta, a silly little dessert I knew would make him laugh. Glass shattered across the floor, mirroring the sound of my heart breaking. All I could manage to say was, "I trusted you both," before I walked out. The days after were a blur of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. Betrayal cut deeper than I imagined possible. I didn't just lose a partner. I lost my best friend in the same moment. Everywhere I turned, memories mocked me. The cafe where we used to study, the park where we carved our initials into a tree, the restaurant where Sophia and I laughed over countless meals. Everything became poisoned. Friends tried to comfort me, telling me I was better off, that cheaters never change, but the truth was I felt hollow. Like someone had ripped away not just my present, but my future too. The questions tormented me. Why wasn't I enough? How long had it been going on? Was every kiss, every word of love, every plan for the future a lie? I replayed every conversation with Sophia, every time she told me Daniel was amazing, every time she said she was happy for us. Had she been mocking me the whole time? I couldn't bear to face them, couldn't handle the whispers from mutual friends, the pity in their eyes. So, I packed my things, found a new job in another city, and disappeared. Starting over was brutal. At first, I couldn't trust anyone. I avoided dating, flinched when men tried to get close, and doubted every kind gesture. I threw myself into work, into creating a version of myself that looked fine from the outside. I smiled at colleagues, went to social events, and acted like I had moved on. But inside, I carried scars no one could see. Nights were the hardest. I lay awake, replaying that scene on the couch, hearing Sophia's laughter echo in my head, feeling the crushing weight of betrayal over and over again. Still, time does what time always does. It dulled the sharp edges of the pain. Slowly, I built a new circle of friends, people who didn't know my past and saw me as whole rather than broken. I found hobbies I had abandoned, picked up painting again, and even traveled alone to places I once dreamed of visiting with Daniel. I told myself that I didn't need anyone else to be happy, that I was strong enough on my own. And in many ways, I was. But deep down, the wounds remained, quiet but unhealed. Looking back, I realize how much that betrayal shaped me. It taught me how fragile trust can be, how quickly love can turn to devastation, and how the people you believe will never hurt you sometimes do the most damage. For 5 years, I carried that weight, not knowing that my past wasn't finished with me. I thought I had buried it, sealed it away in another life. I had no idea that he would find me again. I had no idea that his return would stir up everything I thought I had escaped, and that my response, my surprise, would leave another person speechless. When we finally sat across from each other, the weight of silence between us was almost unbearable. I had spent years imagining what I would say if this moment ever came, and now that it was here, the words tangled in my throat. He looked nervous, like a man facing judgment, and in a way, he was. He began slowly, his voice unsteady, admitting that he had carried the burden of what he did every single day. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, that he wasn't here to justify anything, but he needed me to hear the truth. The truth, according to him, was ugly and yet somehow different from the story I had told myself. He confessed that the night I caught him with Sophia wasn't some one-time lapse in judgment. It had been going on for months. He admitted he was weak, immature, and too cowardly to end it before it destroyed everything. He said he thought he was invincible, that I would always be there, that he could have both my love and the thrill of temptation. His honesty stung like fresh betrayal, but at least he wasn't sugarcoating. He told me what happened afterward. How his relationship with Sophia crumbled within a year. How their connection, built on lies and stolen moments, collapsed under its own weight. He described it as toxic, full of arguments, jealousy, and bitterness. He admitted that she never cared about him the way I did, that he realized too late he had traded something priceless for something hollow. He didn't speak about it with bitterness toward her. Instead, he directed every ounce of blame back at himself. He called himself a fool, said he sabotaged the one good thing he ever had. I sat there listening, torn between anger and a strange, unwanted sympathy. Part of me wanted to scream that his regret didn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep, the trust one lost, the friendships destroyed. Another part of me recognized the pain in his voice, the way his shoulders slumped, as if he had been carrying this weight for years. He said he had tried to move on, but nothing felt real after I left. Every relationship, every attempt to rebuild, failed because he couldn't shake the memory of me. He admitted he searched for me, through friends, online, even visiting places where he thought I might be. He said he had hoped for years that fate would give him one more chance to apologize in person. I wanted to ask him why. Why her? Why ruin something so good for someone who could never measure up? He didn't flinch when I finally did. He said it was selfishness, the thrill of being wanted by someone forbidden, the ego boost he craved at the expense of my trust. He said Sophia fed his weaknesses, flattered his insecurities, and he let himself be pulled in because it was easier than confronting his flaws. But he insisted he never stopped loving me, even when he was betraying me. Hearing that felt like a slap in the face. How could love and betrayal coexist? To me, they were opposites, but to him, they had twisted together in a way he couldn't untangle until it was too late. I challenged him. I reminded him of the nights I stayed awake worrying, the way I tried to keep us together while he was busy tearing us apart. Asked him if he remembered what it did to me to lose not only him, but my best friend. He lowered his head, tears forming in his eyes, and for the first time, I saw real remorse rather than rehearsed apologies. He said he thought about that betrayal every day, about how he didn't just lose me, but also destroyed the closest bond one had outside of him. He admitted there was no excuse, no way to undo it, but he wanted me to know he understood the depth of what he had broken. Hearing him lay it all out didn't erase the pain, but it shifted something inside me. For years, I had imagined him living happily with Sophia, never giving me a second thought. To hear that his life unraveled, that his choices haunted him, didn't make me happy, but it did ease some of the bitterness. He wasn't here gloating, he wasn't proud, he was broken in his own way. And yet, even as he spoke with raw honesty, I knew I couldn't just open my heart again. Apologies didn't rebuild trust. Regret didn't erase scars. He asked me if I ever thought about us, if any part of me wondered what could have been had things been different. I didn't want to answer, but silence spoke volumes. Of course I had thought about it. I had imagined a life where he hadn't betrayed me, where we grew into the future we once planned. But those dreams weren't reality. I reminded him that love without loyalty meant nothing, and once trust was gone, rebuilding it was almost impossible. He nodded, accepting my words without argument. He said he wasn't asking for another chance at love, not yet. All he wanted was the opportunity to show me, through actions not words, that he had changed. I studied him carefully, trying to decide if this was genuine or just another layer of manipulation. But his vulnerability seemed real. His willingness to let me choose whether he stayed in my life or not felt different. He wasn't pushing. He was laying himself bare and leaving the decision in my hands. That alone unsettled me. He wasn't the same man I left behind. He had been humbled, reshaped by his own mistakes. Whether or not that meant he deserved space in my life again, I didn't know. When I left that night, my mind was a storm. Hearing him confess everything I suspected, but never confirmed, tore open wounds I thought had healed. Yet at the same time, it gave me something I had long been denied: clarity. The past wasn't blurry anymore. The lies had been exposed, the truth spoken out loud. It didn't make forgiving easier, but it made moving forward, whether with or without him, feel possible in a way it hadn't before. When he reached out again, I expected nothing more than another conversation, but he insisted he wanted to show me who he had become rather than just talk about it. Against my instincts, I agreed, though I kept telling myself it wasn't a step toward reconciliation but only toward understanding. He brought me to an event that reflected his new life. It wasn't about nightlife or casual gatherings. It was a charity program he had been involved with for several years. He spoke to people with kindness, greeted volunteers by name, and carried himself with a humility I hadn't seen before. Watching him in that environment stirred conflicting emotions. He wasn't the man who once lied to me with a straight face, at least not anymore. But change, no matter how genuine, didn't erase history. I was still grappling with those thoughts when I heard a voice I hadn't prepared myself for. The sound was unmistakable, smooth and familiar, and my stomach dropped before I even turned my head. Sophia. She stood there, unchanged in some ways and hardened in others. Her presence was like being thrown back into the fire I thought I had walked through years ago. My body tensed, my heart raced, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. She smiled as if nothing had ever happened, as if we had parted on casual terms rather than betrayal. She tried to speak to me as though we were acquaintances who had drifted, her tone light, almost mocking. Rage surged inside me. For years, I had replayed that night in my mind, the image of her with him, and now she stood in front of me acting like time had wiped the slate clean. I couldn't hold back. The words poured out of me, years of silence breaking open like a dam. I demanded to know how she could have done it, how she could have betrayed the trust of someone who considered her family. Sophia's response wasn't remorse. She deflected, saying Daniel was never really mine, that if he had strayed it was because something was missing between us. She shrugged, dismissing my pain like it was insignificant. Her arrogance only fueled my fury. I told her she had destroyed not only a relationship but a friendship, and that was something I would never forgive. She rolled her eyes, smirking as though my anger was amusing. For a second, I thought I might lose control completely. But then Daniel stepped in, his voice firm, his stance protective. He didn't try to soften the blow, didn't attempt to mediate. He told Sophia in no uncertain terms that what they had was a mistake, that he regretted every part of it, and that he had no desire to ever speak to her again. He said it in front of others, making his rejection of her public and final. It startled me. The Daniel I remembered had always avoided conflict, always tried to please people even when it meant lying. This Daniel stood by his words, choosing to defend me openly. Sophia didn't take it well. She lashed out, accusing him of trying to rewrite history, of painting himself as noble now that it suited him. But her bitterness was transparent, and instead of defending herself, she only made her own cruelty more obvious. When she realized she had lost control of the moment, she stormed out, leaving behind a trail of tension. The room quieted after she left, and I found myself shaking, not from fear but from the intensity of finally confronting the ghost that had haunted me for so long. For years, I had wondered what I would say if I ever saw her again. I imagined breaking down, imagined being speechless. But instead, I had spoken my truth, and Daniel had stood beside me rather than against me. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it shifted the balance. The triangle that once defined my heartbreak was finally broken apart, its power over me diminished. On the way out, Daniel didn't try to fill the silence with apologies or explanations. He simply asked if I was all right. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me felt lighter than I had in years, unburdened by the confrontation I never thought I'd have. Another part felt raw, the old pain freshly stirred. I realized in that moment that closure isn't a neat ending. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes it comes in pieces rather than all at once. I couldn't deny that what I saw in him that night was different. His choice to stand with me, to sever ties with Sophia so clearly and publicly, spoke louder than any words he could have said. Still, I wasn't ready to let my guard down. Change was one thing, but trust was another, and rebuilding trust wasn't a decision to make in the heat of emotions. When I returned home, I lay awake replaying everything. Seeing Sophia again had been a nightmare I didn't know I needed to face. Hearing her justify her actions, watching her bitterness, made me realize she had never valued what we had as friends. She had taken something precious and treated it like a game, and seeing that truth in her eyes helped me let go of the guilt I carried. Her betrayal was never about me not being enough. It was about her selfishness. That realization alone was freeing. And then there was Daniel. His actions that night forced me to admit that people can change, that sometimes regret reshapes a person. But change doesn't automatically rewrite history, and I wasn't sure if I wanted the past to have any place in my future. I couldn't shake the question that lingered in my mind. Was this the beginning of something new, or was it simply the closure I had needed all along? Walking away from that night, I knew something inside me had shifted. For years, I carried the weight of betrayal, the bitterness of unanswered questions, and the ache of losing not only a partner, but a best friend. Facing both of them again, seeing the truth so plainly in front of me, stripped away illusions I had held onto for too long. Sophia was never the friend I thought she was, and Daniel was no longer the man I had once loved. But the question that gnawed at me was whether he was someone I could allow into my life again, in any capacity. Daniel didn't press me in the days that followed. He gave me space, sending only one message: "I'll respect whatever choice you make." That restraint surprised me. The old Daniel would have tried to charm me, to smooth things over with promises, to push for immediate forgiveness. Instead, he waited. And in that waiting, I realized how much he truly had changed. Yet change alone wasn't enough to erase the years of pain. I spent nights reflecting, replaying everything, weighing the possibility of letting him close again against the risks of reopening old wounds. I asked myself what I truly wanted. Did I want to rebuild something with him, or did I simply crave the closure his return had given me? I thought of the woman I had become in his absence, stronger, more independent, more aware of my worth. That woman didn't need him. But she also wasn't afraid to acknowledge the complicated truth. A part of me still cared. Not in the naive, all-consuming way of the past, but in a quieter way that recognized the bond we once shared. We met again, this time by my choice. I told him plainly that I wasn't sure where I stood. I didn't want promises of forever, and I didn't want to pretend the past hadn't happened. What I wanted was honesty above all else. He nodded, saying he understood, and for the first time, I believed him. He told me he wasn't asking to erase what he had done, because it was part of who he had been, but he hoped I would see who he was now. He said he was willing to take whatever I offered, even if it was only forgiveness without a future. Hearing that, I felt a strange calm. For so long, I had been defined by what happened to me, by the betrayal that shattered me. Now I realized I had the power to define myself differently. Forgiveness, I understood, wasn't about excusing what he did. It was about freeing myself from the grip of it. Whether or not I chose to let him into my life again, I could choose to stop letting the past dictate my present. I told him I forgave him. The words felt heavy and light all at once. Heavy because they carried years of hurt, light because they released me from carrying it any longer. His eyes filled with tears, and he whispered that he didn't deserve it, but he would never forget it. For me, forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. It was acknowledgement of my own strength, a declaration that I was no longer bound by what he and Sophia had done. As for the future, I left it undefined. I told him I was open to seeing where things might go, but with no guarantees. If he wanted to prove that he had truly changed, it would have to be through patience and consistency, not words. He agreed, saying he would rather walk slowly with me than rush and risk losing me again. In the weeks that followed, I noticed myself softening, not in weakness but in acceptance. I no longer flinched at the sound of his voice, no longer felt consumed by the memory of betrayal every time I looked at him. Instead, I saw a man scarred by his own mistakes, trying to rebuild, and I saw myself as someone who had survived and come out stronger. Whether our paths would merge again or diverge forever didn't matter as much as it once had. What mattered was that I was no longer carrying anger like armor. Closure doesn't always come in a neat package. Sometimes it's messy, filled with contradictions, forgiveness tangled with lingering pain, hope braided with caution. I knew I might never fully trust him again in the way I once had, but I also knew I didn't need to. Trust could be rebuilt piece by piece, or it could fade quietly while we both moved on. Either way, I was no longer trapped in the past. Looking back, I see that the surprise of him finding me again wasn't just about him. It was about me. About realizing that the person I became after the betrayal was strong enough to face the past head-on, to confront the ones who hurt me, and to choose my own ending. I wasn't the girl who cried herself to sleep anymore. I wasn't the woman who avoided love out of fear. I was someone who could stand in front of the person who once shattered her and decide, on her own terms, what came next. Maybe the future held a second chance for us. Maybe it didn't. But either way, the choice was mine, and that was enough.